Investiamo nel presente, prima raggiungiamo il futuro. Questa è l'idea che ci spinge ogni giorno a muovere il nostro paese verso la ripresa, a dare a tutti nuovi percorsi da seguire, a usare l'innovazione per essere più liberi di crescere, a esportare la nostra eccellenza italiana nel mondo, ad anticipare i cambiamenti per costruire un domani più sostenibile con tutti voi. Perché il futuro è la nostra destinazione, solo se è un viaggio che facciamo insieme.
Buonasera.
Good evening from the meeting 2021 from Enrico Castelli and Massimo Bernardini. Good evening. So yesterday in this talk, the work to come, we talked about the future professions and how work will change. Today, instead, we are going to talk about the National Recovery and Resilience Plan and the job market and jobs. But what, is the specific part of this plan devoted to jobs? Are there enough funds to support jobs in the future? How much money are we going to get from the EU? So the pandemic showed that some big changing trends are emerging. We saw the advent of smart working, and we certainly need substantial reforms in this sector. To carry out reforms, usually funds are necessary, but this time we have the funds. So it's interesting to know and understand how these funds are going to be used. So we have a very, very important guest, Roberto Garofoli, Subsecretary of State to the Presidency of the Council of Ministers. Welcome to Rimini. Then Francesco Mutti, here as President of Centromarca, the Consumers Brand Association, and we know far too well the excellent products of his brand. And then Francesco Baroni, we have the Managing Director of G Group. And from remote, from London, where he teaches economics, we have Pedro Silva, Professor of Applied Economics and former Minister of Portugal. Can you hear us? Can you hear us? Can you try to speak? Okay, he's connected. He shows that he can hear us. Okay. So we talk about Europe and jobs. We are going to show you again a short extract of the speech delivered by the President of our Republic on Europe. Let's hear what he said. We need to imagine our future. We know that people are willing to restart, and certainly we are going to be able to get better, and we will be able to make our Italy progress. And the EU is going to be the engine of our development, a more balanced and sustainable development. This is a historic opportunity that we need to seize in order to transform it into a better and more stable balance. There is an I and you and an us for Europe as far as its responsibilities are concerned, against sort of short-sighted views and hypocrisy and mediocrity that are the result of self-referential and self-injuring positions. The courage of the I requests a turning point, citizens and people need to be put back at the center, and in order to be enhanced. And we certainly need to rediscover the value of people to enhance democracy again. That's why we need to reinforce the community sovereignty. That's the only thing that can strengthen also national sovereignties. So this community sovereignty is an act of responsibility vis-à-vis citizens and a global world that needs Europe's civilization and its role of cooperation and peace. The emergency responses, as well as the next generation plan, needs to be transformed into a new pathway of shared responsibility. So, Subsecretary Garofoli, first of all, thanks for joining us, because this is one of your first public appearances. And so our president, in a very authoritative way, talks about a strong common responsibility. So if we have a look at the relationship between the National Resilience Recovery Plan and jobs are concerned, how can we interpret these remarks? Well, the whole speech delivered by the president is a constant reference to the sense of responsibility, a common responsibility, and this is something we really need to listen to carefully. The pandemic crisis was an unprecedented one. And the country was heavily hit at a moment of weakness, because the country was already quite weak, not just for the drop of the GDP, because during the lockdown in 2020, 45% of businesses stopped their activities. 70% of companies had recourse to specific subsidiaries, and also consumption rates went down by 41%. There was a negative variation 5 times higher than the rate that was registered when there were stock crashes in the past. So, of course, governments tried immediately to compensate with adequate compensating measures. Well, there are 2 areas in particular that were particularly affected in a more meaningful way. I'm thinking about areas that have always been problematic. I'm thinking about young people and women. On top of that, and then I'll go back to the president's speech, the pandemic accelerated, as you already said during other sessions, the pandemic accelerated deep transforming sorts of movements that were already underway. So somehow there was an acceleration also on specific things. So that had repercussions on the employment market, because new professions will be needed, new skills, new capabilities. The EU says that 60% of the future profiles and the profile jobs over the next 5 years will change, because new policies will be needed also to cope with this new scenario. New training policies, new educational policies, new employment policies to cope with these changes. So apart from the plan, about which we're going to talk in a minute, I think that all that will require a strong commitment and also a deep sense of unity, of participation, and not just of political unity, but in a broader sense. I'm thinking about the unity between the different governance levels. So we need more coordination also between, for instance, the central state and the territorial level. But let's see what this plan includes and foresees. Some key figures. So this is called the Pnrr in Italian. That means National plan for recovery and resilience. It was fully approved by Europe. 191.5 billion euros allocated for our country, first beneficiary, and this until 2026, 68.9 for subsidies and 122.6 as a loan. Another 30 billion as deficit will be made available directly by the Italian government. So employment market is part of Mission 5, inclusion and cohesion. It is considered as fundamental to pursue the goals of the whole plan. The resources for this sector are totally almost 20 billion euros, specifically 11.17 for social infrastructure, households and third sector, 2 billion for the so-called territorial cohesion interventions, and for work policies we have 6.66 billion. These funds will be for training, strengthening of employment center, women's enterprises creation, and dual system of vocational training. And all that aims at transforming the job market, improving employability, and reducing the imbalances between supply and demand in the job market. This is a very evident problem of Italy. And then in order to speed up the access to job market for some degrees, engineering, medicine, architecture, and other sectors will directly somehow made young people capable to access the job market. And then we have digitization that is necessary to keep the pace with other more advanced countries. And for this, we have 43.55 billion euros. Another 57.5 will be used for the ecological transition, for infrastructure and sustainable mobility. We have 25.33 billion euros in order to improve the transport of goods and people all over the country. As far as education is concerned, green light for a new model to recruit the teachers and 4.0 school to digitize the whole educational system. So, Mr. Mutti, loads of money coming. Before that, as entrepreneur, well, what would you use this money for? Well, first of all, good evening. And well, first of all, an entrepreneur must guarantee good management. So first of all, try to do what you have to do without using that money. So having certain and equal justice, and then better matching between supply and demand in terms of information on the job market. And Italy is already an excellent country. We need to keep this level of excellence and try always to show the best possible ethics if we really want to stick to this excellent image that we have vis-à-vis the outside world. So we need to get rid of illegal activities, lack of transparency, unbalanced behaviors that may jeopardize competition. All that can be cost-free, let's say. Money should be invested first and foremost on education and training. Education is a long-term project, so the return on the investment is not in the short term, but certainly you have the best possible return in the long run. And secondly, you need to improve the competitiveness of the south of Italy. The south of our country is suffering very, very much. Very often, financial resources are allocated to the south, but in my opinion, we should change something in that. So we should make first and foremost the south more competitive and try to make it more appealing. And in particular, I'm thinking about, for instance, some tax measures and fiscal measures, energy costs, because if you reduce costs, will make that area of the country more attractive for entrepreneurs, because the south of Italy should become also an area where, legal activities are guaranteed, because first and foremost, entrepreneurs and businessmen need to have, safe conditions when it comes to establishing companies, so where the state is present in a certain way. Oh, by the way, you come from the south, Mr. Garofoli. So what stage are we at? We have identified the 6 macro areas, and so the reforms are underway. Please make the headline for tomorrow. I'm not very good at that. What I can tell you as a sneak peek, let's say, is that the plan was fully approved, and European bodies approved it with full marks. And as far as the governance system is concerned, that was also approved. And the governance model is pretty peculiar, I must say. You asked Mr. Mutti what would he do with his money. Well, the plan is pretty clear about the key choices on how to use the money. Some resources are going to be, allocated to, changes of the job market, because new capabilities will have to be developed. A good share of the resources are going to be devoted to education, vocational training, the reform of PhDs, and also the scientific subjects, the rehabilitation and retraining of workers. Well, this amount, 6.6 billion, is going to go for these activities. So retraining of workers, sustainable economy, digitization. So, and then there is a lot of urgent things that have to be done. So there's a lot of responsibility. All the resources allocated to the digitization of the country is not just interoperability, cloud, and 5G. It's about giving more opportunities to everybody, especially to those living in less connected areas of the country, in order to let them maybe establish new companies, create startups. And also we have important resources for infant and toddler centers, kindergarten, 4.5 billion. Apparently these resources have nothing to do directly with the job market, but actually they're very important if we think about women's jobs. And this is not just a matter of resources, because the plan also included something more, the so-called young people and women's conditionality. What does it mean? Is that all the specific calls to assign, contracts and that are foreseen by the plan need to consider also a specific requirement that sets forth the allocation-specific shares of jobs to women and the youth. So let's start now. Talk about foreign realities. We have now an interview with the Deputy Mayor of Madrid. Let's see the priorities. I thank you very much for inviting me. I would like to share with you what we're doing in Madrid, not just to cope with the pandemic, but also I would like to tell you more about what we're doing to sort of tackle the post-pandemic period. The government and the opposition very often, and probably this happens not just in Madrid, there is a certain tension, and this is logical. The opposition has the specific role to keep an eye on the government, and we need to do our best. The government made a quite unusual decision. In our country, we are starting to have clearly opposed political poles, and we have decided to sit around the table with the opposition and try to do something, because after the pandemic, the top priority for Madrid will be employment, and then the networks, because we have vulnerability situations that got worse with the pandemic. We knew that vulnerable people get more vulnerable and more exposed to the virus. We saw that our social services have become strategic, and certainly we want to strengthen them. But I mean, employment is a key priority, the top priority. Our small and medium businesses are the top generator of jobs, and also independent workers need to be considered. So our measures will help independent workers, SMEs, and companies. We have adopted a very important industrial plan accounting for 11 billion euros because we want to support our businesses. We need to be self-sufficient. I think that this is a lesson that we have learned very well. We have also supported particularly the private sector. First of all, we have reduced the taxes, so property taxes, the tax on buildings, on economic activities, on waste, and also on public soil occupation for the specific bars and cafes activities for outdoor areas. But the pandemic chose deeply our strategies. A strategic tool for employment was the employment agency for Madrid, helping and supporting people who have problems in finding a job. And the agency acts as an intermediary in order to help them go back to work. And we have specifically targeted weaker groups, and we also foresee specific activities for special groups. In Madrid, a very strong network, so today it was established by the region, the city, and it is connected to the state. My idea of city is a city where people have a job, and so they do not need subsidies or, grants, where people have a job and they can provide for themselves. They have their livelihoods. This is key in order to make people feel decent. And after such a difficult period, this is more important than ever. And then education is at the center of our activities. We are also trying to provide support to the elderly, because certainly and without doubt this was the group, the social group that was affected the most. But now a new Madrid, is opening up. New opportunities are being seen. Thank you very much, and I will carefully listen to your experiences, and I hope to meet you in person very, very soon. Thank you.
So it's, quite a widespread program, but, let's stay near the near Spain, near Madrid. So you were Minister for Labor. So the Vice Mayor of a European capital speaks of employment as the crucial point of their program to overcome the pandemic. What do you think about that?
I agree completely. Employment is absolutely critical. First of all, because of the obvious reasons, one needs an income to pursue an active life. But employment is also important for many other reasons, of course. It's the place where you gain skills. It's the place where you meet friends and colleagues. So your social life depends also a lot on employment. It was a very deep crisis. The economy is changing quite dramatically. I think it's very positive that this time the European Union decided to respond actively, energetically, and is laying out a number of programs across different member states that may provide a good response to these challenges. I think there are a number of issues that perhaps we can discuss later as to how these programs can deliver the best possible impact. Some notes that perhaps I would mention concern the issue of transparency, monitoring, evaluation. I think it is an important ingredient towards the success of these programs, a good alignment of these measures in terms of the social issues, the social goals. Of course, there will be many different players involved in these programs at different levels. They will apply for these funds. The funds will be allocated in different ways. I think it is very important to track these decisions to ensure that the impact of these plans can be the highest possible.
Grazie, Pedro Marti.
Thank you. We'll be back to you in a few minutes. Francesco Baroni, country manager of DG Group, one of the most important labor agencies in Europe. Well, it is easy to say that we have to invest in employment, but since you are those who are really working in this field, what do you think about this priority? What are the hindrances that we have to overcome in Italy? Well, we know that in Italy, labor market is extremely complex, extremely complicated, and this doesn't help us because we need much more flexibility in order to have a market that is effective and where jobs can be created. At the same time, we all know that rules do not create jobs. Jobs are created if the market is competitive. The issuing of the National Plan for Recovery and Resilience and its measures could be really a great opportunity for two reasons. On the one hand, these measures, I believe, to try to bridge investment gaps in material and immaterial structures that are needed to improve the competitiveness of the country. And then, for instance, Mission 5 has the objective to improve active policies. Active policies are a fundamental element, I believe, from our point of view, on the labor market. Well, they are fundamental because they can make it possible to actually have the best consequences of what we have on the labor market. The market is characterized by transitions because of a change in skills, transitions due to the fact that there are no longer fixed jobs or positions, transitions linked to the acceleration of existing changes. So, well, effective active policies are extremely important. We are lucky in a way because we can work with the resources of national plan at a time when we are looking at a general change in the market, but also we have an increase of GDP by 5%. So in order to have the resources and the skills necessary to develop this value, we need to let people work. So this is extremely important if we want to move from passive policies to active policies. We've been talking about this for years and years. It's not easy to implement active policies, first of all, because you have to work on people. So it's easier to pay a salary to someone than because this meets their need, rather than give people motivations and provide them with the necessary skills. So is there some kind of polemic attitude towards the citizenship income? Well, no, actually. I believe that if we look at what is happening in Europe, Italy, with social buffers, had a great opportunity that other countries did not have, because enterprises, when they had to stop, did not lose their human capital, where other countries use European funds better. But anyway, this is an issue that I would not like to discuss with you, because we have an interview with the Vice Minister for Education in Poland. We can learn something from them in using European funds. Legislative mechanisms made Poland more attractive over the years. First, investors wanted to take advantage of the low cost of labor, but everything was linked to low-cost manpower. Then there was a second attractive factor. That is to say the areas where they could actually have their plans. And here they had the support of local administrations, and this actually accelerated the process of investment. All these aspects have been very important, but now they are changing. For instance, Poland is no longer one of the cheapest countries in terms of manpower, and we try to give the best possible answers to the interests of investors through skilled labor forces. So I'm talking about specific training and education, what we can propose in terms of training courses, how to actually integrate them and integrate these programs with the labor market. We are no longer running after the west of Europe. We are really part of the developed Europe. So Europe is becoming a very important partner for us. What was the role of Europe in helping Poland reaching these objectives? Well, if we didn't become member of the European Union, so if we didn't have the European support for this development, we wouldn't have been able to achieve these goals from the beginning. We have counted upon European regulations and directives because they show that Europe needs to focus on sustainable development, and the activities of international cooperation and social cooperations and all activities based on scientific exchange among young people are extremely important. If you have exchange, if you have investments, then you have access to modern technologies, also from an economic point of view. Actors of production sites that have emerged thanks to foreign investments are based mainly on modern technologies that have production lines that are extremely innovative. So we have learned quickly the European culture in terms of company and business organization and the use of new technologies. So now, step by step, we can teach something. And this is a great result, and we are really grateful that after a difficult start, after we overcome that period of non-liberal economy that was actually centrally planned when Poland was, in a way, exploited by the communist system, we are now moving to a market-oriented economy and an economy that takes into account social aspects. So in this post-pandemic difficult moment, the support to institutions and enterprises, as well as the financial resources of the European Union, are extremely important for us. Our great national recovery plan is based on the billion of those European funds that are or will be allocated to Poland. So we wanted to really use these European funds as a further impulse for our economic development and to reinforce what we have already achieved.
Udało się osiągnąć.
Allora, mentre ci ha raggiunto
So Massimo Fellini joined us. He's the coordinator of the Department for Labor for the Subsidiary Foundation. But I would like to ask to Under Secretary Garofoli to make some comments on these perspectives that the Polish minister mentioned. Yes, this concept of actors of production sites is extremely important. But Professor Vitellini said the other day, Poland used for its highways the money that were not used by Italy and that were coming from European funds. So, did Italy have a problem in using European funds? How can actually change this situation, since we are about to receive the substantial funds of the National Plan for Resilience and Recovery? Yes, in the programming period to 2014-2020, we are lagging behind in using European funds. I believe we have been using only 40%, and we are already at the beginning of the next programming period. There are different reasons for this. We were late in in signing the partnership agreement, we did not identify the managing authorities in time, but the national plan also responds to different rules in comparison with cohesion funds. There are different reasons. The factors are different on which we wanted to intervene. There is a problem, a gap in terms of the administrative system of the state of our country. So you mean that the Polish administrative system is better than ours? Well, let's say that ours is a little bit slow, so to speak, and it is, well, technically not up to date, so to speak, and this is due to many different reasons, as for instance spending policies which were, yes, useful at the beginning, but there has been also a slowing down of the turnover, and these are also was due to the fact that public officials were not properly trained. So the national plan gives us the possibility, the opportunity to work on this. Yes, actually, our system, our administrative system has slowed down. We have actually managed to spend less money in terms of structures, but we have professional levels that are lower. There is a lack in terms of digitalizations in our public officials, and the digitalization of the whole system is a fundamental step. Our Italian system in 2021 is experiencing an extraordinary moment with an increasing GDP. We had so many successes in many different fields, including sports, but we had 20 years of stagnation. For 20 years, our country was not able to grow. So we need to go beyond what is happening at the moment. We need to understand that we have to change this system and make it work faster. And, well, I'm not obsessed by Poland, but there is another example. So there are some special areas, there are some tax incentives, infrastructural measures that were applied in Poland. Do we have this? No, we did not use these opportunities. We are 100% Italian also in our production system. But what I was trying to say before is that we need to provide financial incentives, but at the same time, we have to create the conditions that will enable entrepreneurs to find the adequate situation to develop in a solid way, because they cannot count on contributions that then all of a sudden disappear. We need to create the adequate atmosphere, and then entrepreneurship, that is extremely important in Italy and can also be attracted from somewhere else in the Union, can develop long-term policies. This is the message I would like to give. A country cannot be built looking at the next election, so we should have longer visions to 10, 20 years, maybe 100 years. Well, if we wanted to look to what is going to happen in 100 years, we need to have young people that are ready to meet the future. According to the Court of Accounts, in the 8 last years, 41% of young people more move to foreign countries. In 2018, 117,000 Italians moved abroad, and 30,000 of them are university graduates. So, well, simplifying, we say that this is a phenomenon that is quite widespread, and well, let us help us understand why this is happening. Well, this actually is a concept that makes us think that what young people do when they move away is negative. But it is not a negative trend, because these are young people that are taking advantage of the opportunities of globalization. So why should we say that this is wrong? We need to understand this phenomenon. We need to understand its importance, and we need to offer these young people the right conditions that would make them stay here and work for their country. So we tried to understand these reasons. We have interviewed, even though actually this has no statistical value, we interviewed 10 young people throughout Europe. Let's listen to the interview. I left Italy because I wanted to explore the world. I wanted to improve my English. I wanted to learn more. And I wanted to see what my value was at an international academic level because in Italy, well, the academic world was closed. It wasn't open as the British one. I received an offer in 2050 by an aeronautic firm, and I said, well, why not? Well, there is work in Italy, there is the market, but there is also, well, I found an interesting opportunity abroad. Well, I moved away because in order to actually do the kind of job I wanted to do. And, well, the point is that we do not find our place, our right position in Italy. And this is true for so many other people, not just me. So, well, in this moment, in Cologne, in the study centers where I work, I think there is a majority of Italians. So, well, yes, this is a sign. Well, I left because I received a good offer, a good proposal. I had just graduated. I was 22 or 23. And I was in a moment in my life when the labor market was opening up to me, and I saw this as an opportunity. I was at the end of the PhD in the Polytechnical School in Milan. I was married already. I had a child, and we didn't. I didn't have very good financial perspectives. I had a proposal for a PhD abroad. I thought, well, actually, at the beginning, I thought that I would have done my PhD in Italy, but then I had this opportunity, and when I had this interview, I was really impressed by the opportunities that they were offering. Well, often I have the impression that here we are in an environment that is more encouraging, that helps us develop the skin that we need to have, whereas in Italy we need to fight in order to have what we need. This international atmosphere that, in a way, opened up my mind, my horizon. So, well, wherever I go, I feel at home. I don't feel the need to go back to Italy. So this was, there has been a growth in my working activity, so it's also easier to improve and grow in terms of training. The companies I have worked for invest a lot in training programs. Well, I found a more effective and a simpler way of working without prejudice, gender-oriented prejudice or age-oriented prejudice, so this is important. So there is more transparency with reference to merit and the support a professor can give you. In Cologne, in order to, when I prepared my application, I had to name a professor in Cologne who would be available to follow my work as a supervisor. So if you go somewhere, it's because there is someone there who wants to work with you. The same happens in Italy, but you can't say it in Italy. You can say it out loud. The tools that researchers and university professors and PhD graduates have are much more than they are in Italy. And it's a pity, actually, because Italy has a very good educational basis, so there would be a great potential. Well, I'd say that this is a very impressive description of what is the situation in Italy. So, Professor Martins, in Portugal was also one country of great migration. Well, you yourself, you're Portuguese, but you're a professor in London. So, well, I don't want to use you as an example, but just to make it clear what the situation. Why? So, well, why did you leave Portugal? And what do you think about this phenomenon of young people leaving their countries?
Non arriva l'audio.
Arriva l'audio.
Unfortunately, we cannot hear you. We cannot hear you.
I'm sorry. I was saying that my personal story is actually very similar to those of many of the people that we have just interviewed. So I also left Portugal to study for my PhD, and I stayed in the UK for many years. Similarly to what the colleague in the panel also mentioned, I think the UK has a very flexible economy and a very flexible labor market. There is a lot of support for entrepreneurship. I think entrepreneurship is so important for the development and the growth of economies and the provision of better working conditions for workers generally. So I'm actually quite supportive of these processes where people have opportunities to move to other countries. So sometimes people are worried about this phenomenon of brain drain. So the talented people are leaving the country. But actually, I prefer to look at it from the perspective of brain circulation. So we have the brains and the legs and the arms and the eyes moving around Europe, looking for better opportunities, gaining new skills, learning about new experiences, and eventually they actually may come back. And by the way, of course, now we have a different context. We have new
questo è un tema che adesso vedremo.
From remote work. I think remote work, remote employment can be a big opportunity, especially for countries in Southern Europe. And hopefully these plans will also create good conditions for the growth of remote work, so that even if moving around, working in different countries is a good thing, if one wants to stay in one's country, one may be better able to do so using these new tools. And by the way, just as a conclusion, although I have been working in the UK for many years, I'm now returning. So actually next week I'm starting a new job in my home country of Portugal. So things can change, and when the economy is recovering and opportunities come up, people can go back to their country.
Certo. Baroni,
Mr. Baroni, you are present everywhere in Europe. So this positive mobility, what is the effect of this mobility? Well, I believe that in the end, all these young people chose for the better. They did not escape. They did not run away from their country. The whole of the labor market today is characterized by a problem which is no longer that there is not enough or there are not enough jobs. There are not enough workers or professionals. So this holds true at different levels. So people with a PhD as well as workers of different educational levels. So companies and enterprises need to be attractive, need to offer opportunities. So in a country like Italy, where we have universities that generate value, it should be easy to make attractive, appealing offers. So here, from my point of view, I think that in a country like Italy, we need to work on our attractiveness, and this means on our flexibility. This is fundamental, because then we can really keep here those people who are to be considered talented. Then, well, we'll now leave the floor to Dr. Garofoli. But first, let's see whether these young people would be willing to come back to Italy. So let's see the second part of the interview. No, at the moment, I do not want to go back to Italy, because what I'm doing here is extremely interesting, extremely challenging, because with my company, we are opening a new market in Germany, and things look good. No, actually, I did not accept offers that were below the level I am at now. Well, if the job is interesting, or if I can contribute to something that is valuable for Italy, maybe the salary would not be determining. And nowadays, it's just Italians that want to go back to Italy. When Italy will be attractive for foreigners as well, that's when the really talented Italians will go back. So if you go back, you will you will have to have the best conditions possible. Yeah, I was asked last year to go back to Rome as a university professor, but the conditions did not suit my family because we would have to change the way we live. Well, to have people going back to Italy, you would have to have tax aspects that should be attracted. But I do believe that the existing law is incomplete, so there are risks, so to speak, because the tax authorities in Italy can carry out verifications and controls, so that we needed to have a certification, and once the prerequisites are met and once the authorization is issued, no controls should be carried out. I don't have plans for the future, but I do believe that sooner or later I'll go back to Italy. Sooner or later, so yes. When we go and look at the rules in the detail, we find out things that we didn't know. That is factor of the controls by the tax authority. Actually, yes, I do believe this can be a discouraging effect. I agree when you said that this brain drain isn't necessarily something negative. So the phenomenon, if we look at it individually, is a good one. I have great admiration for young people who've moved abroad in order to have interesting professional experiences in universities, but also in hospitals, for instance. And I agree with Professor, and I really wish you the best for your return to Portugal. So there is this phenomenon of circular experiences, circular skills, and this is something positive. But we needed to say that we needed to recover our attractiveness for young people from our point of view, from the point of view of Italy, because younger talents needed to come back to our enterprises and in our public administrations as well. As we said before, 70% of young people today do not want to work in public administration. 35%, as they said before during the interviews, 35% of young people in Italy believe that talent, merit, skills is not acknowledged in public administrations. So also in terms of professional growth. So there is a vocational crisis in our public administration, and I think this is very bad news because our administration needs young people, and it will continue needing them also in the future, also for the national plan. So this is a gap that we have to bridge with different kind of policies. So we need to focus on improving skills, on motivation, on the spirit of belonging to a country, but also on retribution, as well as on some obstacles that today make it impossible to have different professional experiences. Just one last thing. In the future, thousands of young people will become part of public administrations, and they will have to contribute to develop that good bureaucracy that we need so much. So you talked about attractiveness. Is Centromarca attractive to young people? Well, yes, Centromarca is surely attractive, and one of the persons interviewed said we should not aim at Italians going back to Italy. We should become attractive for people coming from other countries, from Great Britain, Germany, and so on. And then also Italians will come back to Italy. If we just aim with our policies at re-attracting our Italian talents, well, the objective is not sufficient. So, well, we need to have this administrative system that is working, a public administration that can actually have a dialogue and be encouraging rather than an obstacle to development. We still have 3 more minutes. I thought, well, we were already late. But anyway, Mr. Baroni, I think you can really play a role in all this, in renewing our country in terms of labor agencies, work agencies have a very important role to play here. I believe that this National Plan for Recovery and Resilience and its attention to active policies is important, because active policies are needed to help transitions that characterize the labor market more and more. So if we want to have a labor market that really works, we need to have skills and systems. So the cooperation between the private and the public sector is fundamental. When we're talking about Poland, well, Poland actually has a cooperation, a public-private cooperation that works, and which is also translated into efficient, effective policies. This cooperation nowadays, for instance, the investment on employment centers, should take into account of the fact that we want to provide good services. So we need skills, processes, organization systems, so that working on the knowledge of the market really becomes fundamental. Just one last question. So we have the impression from these interviews that there aren't only economic reasons to come back to Italy. Well, yes, these interviews make us think about the attractiveness of our system. First of all, our country needs more people at work. We need to increase working opportunities for everyone, for women, in order to improve the dignity of the contracts that we offer also to young people, and improving the working conditions that we have, for instance, in the southern part of our country. So by improving the system, we can become more attractive, both for international brains that might come to our country, and also for our Italian brains. So now, while, yes, we are almost late, I would like to thank Roberto Garofoli, Under-Secretary of the Presidency of the Council, Francesco Mutti, President of Centromarca, Francesco Baroni, CEO of the group, and Massimo Fini of the Foundation for Subsidiary, and Pedro Silva Martins from London. We'll be back tomorrow with, well, we've already reached the end, actually, so it's going to be the last talk, the work to come, work or life, with an interrogation point, a question mark. So you can follow us on the website of meeting and on our subsidiary meeting. Giancarlo Giorgetti, Marco Anapel, Giancarlo Blantardo and Roberto Giaccari will be with us tomorrow. Don't forget that the meeting needs your contribution, and part of your donations will be allocated to the Welcome House of Kampala in Uganda, where Ross Musingi welcomes young children from difficult situations. That's all for tonight. Massimo Bernardino, Enrico Castelli. We'll see you tomorrow.
Più investiamo nel presente, prima raggiungiamo il futuro. Questa è l'idea che ci spinge ogni giorno a muovere il nostro paese verso la ripresa, a dare a tutti nuovi percorsi da seguire, a usare l'innovazione per essere più liberi di crescere, a esportare la nostra eccellenza italiana nel mondo, ad anticipare i cambiamenti per costruire un domani più sostenibile con tutti voi. Perché il futuro è la nostra destinazione, solo se è un viaggio che facciamo insieme.